Lovely. Okay, right. So thanks for coming and joining me. This isn't going to be a massively long thing. This is going to be about an hour, I'm expecting, so it should be done by 7 o'clock. If you do have any questions, I've got the chat window open and I'm monitoring that. So drop questions in there if you've got anything at all that comes up, and we can deal with that as and when. I might not get your message straight away. So if I don't answer immediately, it's not I haven't seen it or I'm ignoring you. It is simply that I'm just going to finish talking about what I talk about, and then I'll come back and answer any questions at the end. Once we're all finished, I'll give you a good few minutes to pop any questions you've got in the chat, and then we can take it from there. If you're watching this on YouTube, then drop us a message on the Facebook page, which is facebook.com/charitydnd, and we can answer those questions for you there. So, why are we doing this? As you all may know, we have the War Council, which is our group of DMs who run our games in the All Havens and develop all of the background and the lore for our really big events, our big world that everyone is joining in and playing with. We have a group of people who are going through the process to join the War Council, and this is just one of the things that we're putting out as a little kind of guide as to kinds of things that we look for and we think about when we are planning games. So there's going to be some familiar themes here tonight, and we're going to start with something which hopefully everyone should be familiar with. Let me just flick my share over to that. So the 6 Ps, the 6 Ps of Charity Gaming Guild DMing. So we've got them there, clear as day: preparation, pacing, purpose, players, play. I've had two duplications: preparation, pacing, purpose, players, patience, and presentation. I'm not going to go through each one of those. There's a YouTube video on each one of those sections going over very, very briefly on the YouTube channel. But these 6 principles underpin everything we do as a DM. And it takes it right back to the start. And it's always there at the forefront of our mind, and we're thinking about planning an adventure and how that works. Obviously, we need to think about players, and players is quite often going to be the first thing we think about when we're running D&D games for our mates, our friends, our family, that kind of thing, because you know the people you're going to have around your table, and you're going to be able to anticipate their playing level experience as a player. You're going to anticipate their race, their class, their level, and all the things you need to take into account. That isn't always the case when you're running for the Charity Gaming Guild. We will quite often turn around to the DM and say, okay, guys, we're running an event. You're going to have 5 players. They're going to be at level 10. That's all you're going to know until you turn up on the day. So it adds another element of another thing to think about, another thing to be aware of, and to think about the kinds of things that are going to impact on your game. So we start with players when we're talking about any of this kind of thing. And it's always going to go back to when you run a game for us, one of the first questions I'm going to ask is, when do you want to run it? How many people do you want to run it for? And what level do you want them to be? At that point, you decide, I want to run it for 3 people at level 5. Great, excellent. Well, you now know level and the quantity of players, and that's really important for balancing encounters, which I'm going to show you a couple of tools to help balance encounters that work quite well, and show you how we've done that. What it's not going to give you is all the nuances that come with the different class and race combinations. It's not going to give you how experienced your players are going to be. So this goes back to us being flexible as DMs and being able to modify and change our adventures based on the people that we have playing in them. So preparation, pacing, purpose, players, patience, and presentation. Players being the thing we start with. When we're talking about running a game, quite often you'll have seen on the page, it goes up as a placeholder event. So it'll say, there's a one-shot happening here, and it's going to be great. And when you're this many people, you're going to be this level. And that's all we'll say to begin with. And that's because the DM is in that first preparation stage of getting things together and working out what they need to do to make the event work. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you guys a bit of a look behind the screen. Something that I have never done before, that I'm hoping will be interesting and useful to you. So let me get rid of that. There we go. So on the 16th of April, I ran a one-shot adventure called The Lost City. This adventure, I'm going to have to remind myself of how many players there were. We'll come back onto the notes. Alvestus, Elwood, Henry Maripos. So I had 5 level 10 adventurers. So the very first thing we're thinking about, we go back to our players. I know my players are 5. I know the level 10. When we put this event up, what I said to people was, this is going to be aimed at more experienced players. So we've got a slightly higher level. We've got level 10, whereas if we're going to be aiming at newer people, they go for level 3 or even lower than level 3 sometimes if we don't want to have the complications of the subclasses creeping in. And knowing this does help me tailor my game a little bit more to the players that are coming into it. So if you are running for us and you want to run a more complex game, you can say to us, I'd like to run for 4 players, but I want to make them level 15. And I want it to be that a little bit more difficult. So we can then start aiming those products at the right people. That works twofold. So first is DM, you know what you're going to get. You know you should be getting those more experienced players. But also as the charity, we are able to take that product and promote it to different people. And we draw different people into those different events. That's why that's so important. So what we're really looking at is how we write this adventure and what happens. The very first thing we need to think about is a story arc, and that doesn't need to be massively complicated. In fact, quite the opposite. When you take any story and you break it down, what you really see is you are looking at a person or a group of people who are either trying to get something, do something, or stop someone getting something or doing something. That's it. Those are the only real elements in a story that we need to think about. And a good example, if we take something like The Lord of the Rings, we watch those films, we read those books, we are watching the good guys try and get the ring to Mount Doom to destroy it, and we're watching the bad guys, Sauron, try and get the ring to come back to power. So the whole story is about trying to get the ring, trying to keep the ring, trying to destroy the ring, or trying to use the ring. So it's people wanting to find something, to get something, or to do something. And it's how that happens. Once you start digging in a little bit deeper and you start layering up all of the other storylines, it gets a bit more complicated. But on the face of it, everyone just wants to get something or do something. Even when you think about Gollum, for example, or Smeagol, he wants to get the ring because he loves the ring. And that's all he really wants, what he really cares about. When you think about, I think another example, the Ents, all they want is to avenge the death of the trees from Mirkwood Forest, which Saruman cut down. So all of these things are what we have to think about. And that's something that I was very aware of when I started writing this session. So in my DM notes, which every good DM should have, you'll see I've got one here called Story Arc. And this is exactly what it is. The story arc is as simple as this. Lord Yorick Wavewalker has summoned a group of adventurers to find a legendary lost city deep below the Sea of Sorrows. It's rumoured there's a golden trident, that the hero that wields it commands the oceans. Simple. Sorted. That is what's going to happen. So that's our story arc. That's what our players are going to be trying to accomplish, and that's what we as a DM have in our head. You'll notice there's a 0 next to that, and the next steps on the right-hand side here, numbered 1 to 8, what we call the story beats. These are the parts of the story that the players are going to have to go through. They're almost like the chapters in the story, if you like. So it breaks down into these 8 sections, and we're going to take each section one part at a time. We're going to show you why it's in here, what job it has, what purpose it has, and how we layer those things up together. So starting with the story arc side of things. Sorry, not story arc, the Welcome to Oceanhold. There's 2 ways you could do this as a DM. You can do what I've done here and write something of a script, and which you can read to your players. And that's absolutely fine. If you want to do that, you can do that. You just have to be careful when you present it, and we go back to presentation in our 6Ps here, that it doesn't come off you're just reading from a piece of paper. You need to have that engagement and that storytelling built into there as well. Quite often what I will do is I'll write a passage like this, and then just before I'm going to deliver this, I'll go back through it again, and then I'll completely not use the passage and ad-lib the whole thing, which to me, well, for me, rather works quite well. It is down to your preference as to what works for you. But the whole purpose of this Welcome to Oceanhold is to get people into the setting. So we talk about a hook, is to get people into this setting. And the hook here is really, really quick and simple. And hooks for one-shots are really important. We'll go back to our 6Ps again. We're going to pick out pacing, making sure our game runs to time. We don't want to be wasting time in a one-shot getting people into the city. Let's make it quick, clean, crisp, and get them there straight away. So, okay, guys, you're in Oceanhold. You have answered the call of Lord Yorick Wavewalker. Done, sorted, lovely. Happy days. If it's a campaign, on the other hand, and you've got the luxury of multiple sessions, you might then start thinking about, well, so you're here because of this, and then player 2, you're here because of this, and player 3, you're here because of this, but I don't want you to tell anybody else what's going on. And then we can start weaving those narrative devices together to make a multi-layered story. And we're going from a quick one shot, which is 4 hours, to a campaign which spans 4 years. You've got the luxury of time there. I'm going to tend to focus on the one shot side of things tonight, purely because the Lost City was a one shot. I want to make sure that you've got the information from there. So part 1 of that Welcome to Oceanhole, part 1 of that introductory, is the hook, getting people into the city. Part 2, and you'll see it there in brackets, this part here, introducing the party. Giving the party the opportunity to introduce themselves is really, really important. You don't want to be taking player agency away and just introducing all the characters and tell everybody what everyone else looks like. There may be more or less information other people want to do, and certainly in a one shot, you can give them 10 minutes just to sort of play things out between themselves, and then you can move the story on. I'm going to go back to pacing again. It's really important that you keep an eye on this and you've got an idea of roughly where you want to be. The rest of that section then builds up on that introduction, and it's in this case, it's the introduction to Lord Yorick Wavewalker, and it's given the quest and all the other bits and pieces. When we think about presentation as well, we need to think about what we show people. So there's 2 things you can do as a DM. You can give people images like this. So this is a map of the All Havens when it eventually loads, because as I said, my internet connection is diabolical. And you can show people where they are in the world. So because we're playing on Roll20, I can ping Oceanhole and go, here you are, this is where you guys are here, this is where you are in the world. That's great because it gives people a sense of where they actually are in relation to other things. It's really good for new players because they get the whole world view before you drill down into that one location. And it's really good for experienced players who have played in the All Havens, for example, loads of times, because they know roughly where they are. They know roughly what kind of things to expect. The second thing I always do to set atmosphere and to give players more of a feeling of where they are is an image like this. And this is an image I used on Lost City, and it just gives a feel. So when they're having that encounter with the quest giver, for example, when they're wandering the streets, just use an image like this. It will load. It does get much crisper than this, I promise. When they get this image, they've got in their mind's eye an idea of what kind of place they're looking at. This isn't an intricate map. This doesn't show every street and every house and every building. This gives, it's like a set. It gives an atmosphere. It gives a feeling to those players as the kind of place that it is. And once you look at those pictures and you're listening to the DM's narrative, you're going to put your own kind of sound effects into the background. You might hear bells ringing. You might hear seagulls crowing, the rush of wind. And as a DM, you then don't have to give your players quite so much. You're not playing theatre of the mind when we play online. You've got all of these images at your disposal. At a click of a button, you can give them an image and give them a flavour or a feeling of what a place is like. And certainly this is where I started. So they all got introduced here, and then we moved on to the next section, which is man in the sub. So basically, in this section, I had to give a device into the story to get them underwater to find a lost city. There's loads and loads of ways you can do that. But one of the things that the guys who have been with us a long time will know is I love doing what I call running a thread. So running a thread through all of and joining them all together to make this one big tapestry, which is the All Havens. So when people come play this game, they go, I know her from that YouTube video, or oh, that's that player from that game I played the other week. So we all have those callbacks to all of our different games. One of the callbacks I used was a gnomish inventor by the name of Joe Hammer. If you don't know who Joe Hammer is, again, head over to the YouTube channel, have a watch of some of the Company of Fate videos. She is a gnome NPC who was armed with a couple of pistols, part of the Gnomish Inventors Guild, which are essentially just inventors, and she was absolutely diabolical. She was rubbish. She couldn't hit the broadside of the barn, and it wasn't a great NPC, but it was a great team building thing in Company of Fate to get everyone to come together and have a look at that. So I brought her back here. Thought, well, this is set before Company of Fate, so she'd still be part of the guild. So she pops up with a massive submarine. So again, we're going to think about presentation. Now, I could spend ages describing the submarine to my players, or I could just use this. I could just get a picture of the submarine and show them what it looks like, give them an idea of what it looks like. And we're thinking about presentation. We've got the ability to use images, so let's use images. We're thinking about pacing, because if I can just show them a picture of what the sub looks like, it's much, much easier than trying to describe it in minute detail. What you'll see on here as well is some GM notes. So in case you're not familiar with Roll20, players can only see the top half. Anything from that bold GM notes down is only what the GM can see. So you are getting a proper behind the screen peek at this adventure and exactly how it works. These buttons are the controls to the submarine. Now, I told the pie that there's no room for Johanna. She's got to get off, and they've all got to get in, and someone's got to drive. And I told them all 7 buttons did once, and once only. It was then up to them to either take the notes or remember what those buttons did. And that is directly ripped straight off from a podcast, which is NADPod, not another D&D podcast. It's great. Go and listen to it. It's a hell of a lot of fun. But they basically fly an airship, and their DM Murphy uses the same principle as this. And it does lend to some quite funny things. Players don't take notes properly, they forget to take notes, and then you as the DM don't remind them. You kind of encourage them to just press buttons and see what happens. And it just adds that layer of uncertainty, which comes into effect in a big way in a little while. So we set the scene, we've got them off, we're going to go back to our DM notes. We've got this man in the sub, which is just some notes for me to remind me what happens, and then they go off. And this is where we get the first encounter. So we're probably 10, 15 minutes into the adventure, and already I'm throwing a combat encounter at them. We've gone straight in at pacing, we hit the ground running, and we go for it. So this is another battle map. This is actually the map at the end of their combat. The big notes I can see, but they can't. They're on the DM's layers. Don't worry about that. We've got all of the little tokens around the side to help track initiative. And of course, here's our big sub. Now, why is the sub up on its own like that? You might ask. That is because the player who was in control of the sub forgot what button did what, pressed the wrong button, and the thing just twirled around. So it just adds that little bit of more uncertainty, that little bit more fun, a little bit more flavour. And it stops the combat from being just run up to something and hit it until it dies. It's a little bit more than that. It gives the players something else to think about. Being underwater as well, these guys were fighting some giant sharks. So we had some tokens down here, which we could drag on, and it pops up. I think they had 3. I think it started with 3 and ended up with 5 or 6 on the map. And they had different weapons on the subs they can use as well. So don't be afraid to come up with rules, come up with some extra cool stuff for your players to do, because it just helps. And if you just chuck ideas in, you can always ad hoc stuff on the fly. But obviously, we want to go back to that preparation. We want to make sure you've got something there. So for the sub, I'm going to pull this back up again. And again, it's a total rip-off of the Infernal War Machines from Baldur's Gate Descent to Avernus. I literally took the same rules and put it underwater, but we just have to think about how things work a bit differently. So once they hit the catastrophic damage threshold on that table, we start thinking about water rushing into the sub, things starting to sink. And this is where your more experienced players come in. One player who was playing in this game used her spells to control water to keep water out of the sub, which was a fantastic use of things. And we rewarded that by giving that player inspiration. But also, without them, that player would have been in big trouble. It wouldn't have been able to make it through the fight. It's probably worth mentioning as well, we need to have some kind of device in here which stops the players from dying instantly if the sub gets completely ruptured. So the way we do that, or the way I did that, was I put some what we called potions of greater water breathing in there. Just trying to think about how they are. Cool. So after drinking the potion, again, the ability to breathe underwater, speak underwater, and hear as they run loud for a period of 24 hours. But there is that constitution saving throw, or they become sick. You get a bout of diarrhea and sickness. And again, that's just something extra in there. It's just that little bit of something extra put into the adventure just to make things a little bit more interesting without taking up a bag more time. Because if that player takes that potion, fails that constitution save, as a DM, you don't need to have those effects take immediate action. You could delay that slightly. I know it says suffer an immediate bout of diarrhea and sickness, but what would happen if they're mid-combat, the sub ruptures? Their action is they swig the potion, then they swim outside. Why not wait till the start of their next turn before something happens and have that impact on the combat, have those events matter in the game. We talk about purpose as one of our 6 P's. Have things happen for a reason. Don't just down the potion, be sick, and then swim out and it have no effect whatsoever. Have something happen there to make it interesting. Feed off what your players do. Feed off the roles. Make the roles matter. Make the decisions matter. Nothing should just be in here just because. It should have a reason, and that's something that we're really keen on getting put into our games as part of the charity game guild, as part of the War Council, that we have people who do stuff that matters, that really, really matters. Just spare me 2 seconds before I carry on. I'm just going to check and make sure there's no one sat in the waiting room. No, good. So they do this big old fight, and at this point in this game, I had some big IT issues. My internet connection wouldn't hold, my computer was being a pain in the backside, and we lost maybe 20 minutes of the adventure. This is something that you may come across DMing for us, especially running online, is technical problems, issues, things that are going to stop you from being able to run your game effectively, things that are going to stop you from being able to engage with your players, to progress the adventure forwards. It's one thing when it happens to the players. When it happens to you as the DM, you've got to be able to think on your feet. The whole next section I completely skipped. They got to the city, and I used this image, which was deliberately a little bit blurry, to give them some kind of a taste of where they are. And they were then going to use something called a skill-driven narrative to make it through the city. And depending on what happened in the skill-driven narrative would depend on depend on the encounter they came across when they got to the city. Some of you are aware of the skill-driven narratives that I use, and that Chris uses them as well, I know. But for those of you that aren't, a skill-driven narrative is a way to have a player-led cutscene in your games. So, for example, you might be playing a game of D&D, and let's take ourselves away from Lost City for just a moment. Let's say your player's got to travel from village A to village B across a field, a large plain or something like that. You could, as a DM, say, well, it takes you an hour to get there, so that's kind of it. Or why not make that an encounter? Why not make it matter that they've got to travel from one place to another and it's a dangerous wilderness scape? The way the skill-driven narrative works, I'm going to break it down very, very briefly. We are going to do a video on it in the future. And the first thing you do is say to your players, you are going to make it. So in this case, for Lost City, you are going to get to that city. But how you're going to get there will depend on what happens when you get there. And what the players need to do is they pick a skill they're proficient in, and they describe to the DM how they're going to use that skill to complete the objective. So in this case, it's how they're going to use the skill they pick to get to the city undetected, to get to the city without incident. Or another game we've run was in a wizard's tower, and it started to collapse. So how are you going to escape the wizard's tower? How are you going to escape the cavern? What are you going to use? Which of your skills are you going to utilize to get you and your party through safely? The player will then pick a skill they're proficient in, and they will narrate to me as the DM what they're going to do. So, for example, a player might say, I'm going to use my perception to scout out what's where and try and work out a route to get to the tower. And what we'll do is we'll set a DC based on that. So as a DM, you think about it, you think, yeah, that's quite reasonable. We'll set it as a DC 12. And you tell the player your DC is 12. They make the check, pass or fail. Nice and easy. Move around to the next player, and the way you decide the player initiative is just by getting them to roll initiative. It's as simple as that. That player then does what they want to do with one restriction. They cannot use the same skill the person directly before them used. So player 1 uses survival or perception rather. Player 2 might decide they're going to use athletics. So I'm going to swim really, really fast and try and dart behind some cover. Cool. You carry on until everyone has done it, has got a pass or fail, and you modify the DC depending on what they say. For example, if they're underwater and one player says something along the lines of, I don't know, what might they say? I'm going to shout out underwater to try and scare people. Well, that could work. So what are they going to use? Probably intimidation. Well, how much is that intimidation going to work underwater? They're going to make a check, and you might set that as DC 18. So we've got this flexible role in DC. The reason I tell my players what that DC is going to be is because that way, when we next do a skill-driven narrative, their brain is already starting to work in that way, and they're starting to think about, how do I actually use this skill most effectively? If you've got a big group, you can drop the "you must be proficient in a skill." You could say you can use a skill you're not proficient in, but you're all with disadvantage. It's as simple as that. You work your way through, and depending on the passes and fails, and the ratio between the two will depend on what happens. I typically use 3. I use more passes than fails, an equal number, and more fails than passes. And that sets the difficulty for the next encounter that they're going to come across. It's really important that you have those encounters lined up, go back to preparation and think about pacing as well, and that you make sure everything works nicely. The encounter that I had up was an underwater combat. More fails than passes. They'd had to fight 2 hydras underwater. An equal number would have been 1 hydra, and more passes than fails would have been no hydras. They would have been able to navigate their way through the city. And they might have done a little non-combat encounter and see if they can want to explore or something like that. Maybe have them find some chests, some healing potions, those kinds of things. As it happened, I couldn't do this. And the reason I had to skip this was because of pacing, going back to our Ps, and because I have those internet connection issues, I knew I could cut this out and the story would still make sense. So this bit never actually happened. The party got to the tower with relative ease. While we're here, while we're talking about encounters, underwater encounters, or any kind of encounter, it's really important that part of your preparation you balance those encounters properly. One of the tools, or the tool that I use to balance my encounters most often is this, which is called Fight Club. I recommend you do it, but just remember it is only a guide. If I have 5 level characters and I chuck 3 polar bears at them, this says it's deadly. Just over here. Take that as a guide. You should have some idea of how experienced your players are. If it's a campaign, you definitely have an idea of what they can do. And these CR calculators are great for an idea, but don't rely on them solely. Be prepared to change and flex your encounters. We're not going to go into running encounters in great depth, but that's a tool you can use right there. And you can see the web address up the top there as well if you do want to use it. So, moving on to the next section of this adventure. Where are we? Let's go back to our notes. So we've done approach the city, and we're now onto the temple entrance. Now, I'm just going to get rid of that for a second. Puzzles is what's coming next. Puzzles are a really interesting thing to run as a DM. You need to really give careful consideration to what puzzle you put into your adventure. This is the puzzle that I used. Anyone who's familiar with the game Skyrim will be familiar with this. The party are told there are 3 underwater pedestals with buttons on the top. They press a button, and as a DM on this layer, I will literally rotate the ring 1 symbol round. And I can rotate each ring independently as well. And then the middle ring also rotates. The trickiest thing is finding out where the little thing is. It's over there. The players get to see what you can see here. So they can see this little passage. The Kraken struck the ocean deep, arising from his eternal sleep. Melora was the first to fall. Her divine power could not save them all. The might, of course, struck the highest peak, but even his strength seemed too weak. The Kraken sunk this great town into those who are blessed with renown. I'm going to tell you the solution to the puzzle straight away. You literally work your way. It's a little story. So the Kraken strikes. That's the first paragraph. Melora is the first to fall. Well, if a religion check or any religion-based character would be able to look at that and realise that Melora is the goddess of life, so the tree is her symbol, so she should be at the top when it comes around. There we go. The next one is the might of Cord struck the highest peak. Cord is the god of weather, but it talks about the highest peak there, so we want the mountain. So they press the button until it rotated around to the mountain, got to the top. And the last paragraph there, the Kraken sunk this great town, is talking about the water. So it moves the water around to the top. If it's going to let me, yeah, there we go. As soon as it's lined up like that, the door opens to the temple. Simple, really simple. Never underestimate your players. Your players are expected to be complicated, multi-layered, and will read into it way too much. And the players who played this particular puzzle were convinced that it started from the inside and went out, because there's a symbol of the Kraken on the center of the puzzle, and the first line is the Kraken. So just don't overcomplicate your puzzles. Keep them simple. This, like I said, is a direct rip straight from Skyrim. And that's twice now in this game. I've ripped ideas from somewhere else. I've ripped an idea from AdPod, so thanks to them. And I've ripped an idea straight from Skyrim, so thanks Bethesda. Do that. Grab stuff from other places. There's no such thing as an original idea. There's no shame in stealing something and repurposing it for your own kind of use. Make it engaging, interesting, and visual. So these guys could literally see what you can see on the screen now. It's engaging. They've got something to look at and think about. If you're trying to do a puzzle theatre of the mind, be very careful, because it's not easy to do, to keep track of all the moving parts of the puzzle. There is another puzzle, which I'm not going to spoil because it's in one of our YouTube videos. Andy, one of the Warcouncil members, I absolutely love this puzzle so much. We were playing the Ancient Vault of Nageldeer, and I was a player in it, and he threw a puzzle at us. It was a puzzle door, and it was absolutely amazing. It was probably the best puzzle I've ever seen in my life. So head over to our YouTube channel, find the Ancient Vault of Nageldeer, and watch it. And watch how he runs that puzzle, how he sets the puzzle up, the solution to the puzzle. It's the last bit before the big bad evil guy at the end. Watch that. Watch everyone freak out. It's hilarious. It's really, really fun. So yeah, that's enough about Andy's puzzle. They did eventually get through. As a DM again, though, you're thinking pacing. You're thinking, right, I need these players to get through this because I've got something else lined up for them in a minute. How am I going to get them through this puzzle? And you can do things like getting them to make skill or ability checks. You can get them to think about things. You can give little nudges, little hints. I'll give you another example of a little hint. I had in Company of Fate, had the party separated in the corridor by 3 portcullises. All they had to do was twist a torch to raise the portcullis. I had one of the characters burn himself on the torch. One of the experienced players in the group, Niall, he said, that is a DM hint. Look at that torch. And they did. They looked at the torch, did the investigation check, and the puzzle got solved. It's really simple. Puzzles should be speed bumps. They shouldn't be game enders. They should be something that puts your party on the off foot. So they solve the puzzle and move on through the adventure, and it gets them thinking. Don't forget as well, puzzles are not for everybody. Some players love puzzles and will have a puzzle dungeon and will go from puzzle to puzzle to puzzle to puzzle to puzzle. Some players don't like puzzles at all, and one puzzle is quite often enough. Especially one of our one-shots. What we're trying to do with the Warcouncil one-shots is run games that appeal to absolutely everybody. We go back to players, we go back to preparation, we go back to patience, and we think, well, what do I need to think about with all of my players? How do I make sure everyone gets the most out of this adventure and can really put into it? So, puzzles. They then get through and we get to the final section of the adventure, which is a dungeon crawl. Now, again, what you guys are seeing on the screen now is the finished dungeon. I'll just scroll right off the screen. So we've got this bit here, the temple crawl. So my DM notes are literally for all of the rooms. Again, the players can't see the numbers or see all the rooms. They can only see bits and pieces, but you guys have got the DM view at the moment, so you can see everything. I did chuck another little kind of puzzle in here, and it was something I said at the start of the adventure. I spoke to the players and said, you guys are experienced players. Something to be aware of is you could finish this adventure, think you finished it, get back to the quest giver, and realise you've completely failed, which is exactly what happened. The whole premise, the whole idea of this, they've got to find a trident. The big bad evil guy down here, I can't remember what name I gave you now. Was he in room 9? Sultan Kenzo. Yeah, he's a married Sultan Kenzo. He's got a black trident. Well, Lord Yorick Wavewalker specifically described the trident they're looking for as a golden trident. So again, if they didn't take the notes properly, they're not going to find that out. That's okay. That's not a problem, because our games matter. Our charity game guild one-shots have an impact on the story. So this, if they'd completed this adventure and got the golden trident back to Lord Yorick Wavewalker, it would have been the story of how he got his trident, and those characters would have gone down in history in the background of the Allhavens as the characters that gave Lord Wavewalker his trident. In actual fact, they took the black trident. What actually happened was there's 2 buttons one in area 6 and one in area 8. You press the buttons and the trident will appear here. The marriage was guarding the trident. And there's all kinds of interesting interactions that happened here. The end combat was okay. One of the bits of feedback I got from my players was it felt a little bit hit it until it die, and that's absolutely fine. As a DM for us, you need to be open to that feedback. You need to be able to recognise these guys are my players, and this is something I could do better next time. And that's certainly something they said to me, and something I took on board. Essentially, they went through the whole dungeon, the whole thing. They missed out that entire room 2. They came through room 1, down through room 3, and then into the main room here. Room 3 was a puzzle room. So room 3 was a drain. And this is quite an interesting story as well. And there's a little lesson for any players who might be watching this as well. Chris played Maripos, who was a Triton, and I think he took, I can't remember what it was called, took an ability or spell or something which let him leap up out of the water. I think it's a ranged ability for Triton, so I could be wrong. Essentially, this room, you'll see it there, the water drains and it comes down, and over time it gets lower and lower and lower. There's a button on the scene, I have to press the button to fill the room back up with water. Chris leapt out of the water using an ability he never thought he would use in his life to press the button to bring the water level back up. Again, a really simple puzzle, but without having that one specific ability with that one specific character, that would have been a totally different story. I'm just going to backtrack to the 6th piece for a second here as well and think about our players. Think about the guys who are playing the game. I knew Chris had that ability. I knew that that puzzle was solvable. If Chris didn't have that ability, there were other things they could have done as well. Things like Mage Hand, for example, could have been an option. They could have thrown something at the button. There's lots of ways they can solve that puzzle. It's really important when you build something, you make sure your party has multiple ways of solving that issue or that problem. For example, the button, if I had seen, actually, there's no way these guys can solve this button, they've got nothing that can physically get there if the room drains of water, then I would have had to rewrite that room. And it's really important that you keep that flexibility and you look back at your players, and you have the patience of your players to look at that room, that puzzle, and is that solvable? Can they do it? 9 times out of 10, you will write something and you'll be 3/4 of the way through writing it, and then you'll find out who your players are, and you'll realise, oh no, that's not going to work, or that idea is much better, and you'll rewrite part of the game or part of the campaign. That's perfectly normal. That happens all the time. I've already announced our podcast is coming up. No word of a lie. I've written the first 5 or 6 episodes, probably 7 or 8 times before I finally settled on something I'm happy with, knowing who my players are and what's happening. So it's really important we take the time, we look at those players and we go through things. Once that is all done and dusted, you then need to think about the campaign end. I hate it when a game just ends. That's it. Oh, you've got to try it. Good job. Well done. Well, where's the purpose? What's the consequence? If you've got time, why not play out an encounter? How do they get back to the quest giver? And time was really against us at this point for this adventure, which is partly down to my fault for the connection and the IT issues, but it also meant I had to speed the game up. So I narrated the end of the adventure. Initially, what was supposed to happen, the temple was supposed to collapse and come down. And you can see there another skill-driven narrative. SDN is skill-driven narrative, and you can see we've got all fails, more passes than fails, and all fails, more fails than passes, more passes than fails, or all passes. So I've gone for extra levels in here as well. And it changed the DC of the dexterity saving throws with the crumbling temple. This could have killed somebody. They could have gone through the entire adventure and died at the last minute. Is that okay? Yes, absolutely fine. Can you kill your players? Yes, you can kill your players, but beware of what the consequences of doing that are. If you're in a campaign and you've planned an arc around a player and you kill that player off, you can absolutely carry on with the arc, but you might think around things a little differently, how it's going to work. This would potentially have been an incredibly deadly way to escape the temple, and I could have killed some characters off here as well. As it happens, time was against us, so this is something else I cut out of the adventure to allow us to push on and to push forward. We got to the very end with the hand over the trident. I didn't make any notes on this section, And the reason for that is it was a simple bit of role play between the players and me. Again, I'm making sure we've got elements of every part of a D&D game in here, but in a weird order, because these players have seen all this. They used to role play dungeon, role play done. So we've got combat encounter in a vehicle. We've then got what have we got next? We've got the skill-driven narrative to get to the place. We've got fighting the Hydras. We've then got getting into the building, the puzzle drawing. Then you've got the dungeon to deal with. Then you've got to get back to another skill-driven narrative. And then you get the role-play section at the end, where you learn more about Lord Yorick Wavewalker and what he's like. And we role-played that out, and as it turns out, they didn't give him the right trident. So his trident is still buried in this temple somewhere for some adventurers somewhere else in the All Havens to come and get. We'll go back to what I said right at the start about weaving a thread between narratives. These characters these guys have made, I'll just bring up the list of characters there. So Alcestis, Apple, Elwood, Henry, and Maripos. Some of them have appeared in other games. So Maripos, for example, he was in Malicious Divinity, which is on YouTube again, so go ahead, give that a watch. Alcestis has been in other games as well. I think that's it. I think it's just those two. But it means that if those players decide to use those characters again in the future, they can draw on the knowledge that that character has gained in the All Havens, and they know, oh, Lord Wavewalker was trying to get that trident. Or later on down the line, they're playing a campaign which is set a while in the future. They see Lord Yorick Wavewalker with the trident, or somehow he got that trident. How did that happen? Because I failed to do it. So what we do is we're building those layers into the All Havens. We're building up those stories, those arcs, those narratives, and we're giving our players those running threads to take from game to game. Like I said, Maripos was Chris's character. He played in Malicious Divinity, and he played in this one as well. And he took some of the characteristics of that character from one game to the other. And no doubt we'll see Maripos again in the future. But it helps to just join everything together. We join the dots. One of the biggest things in the War Council is being able to work with the other DMs to create a nice layered narrative where everything ties together somehow. Speaking of tying things together, you will see that happening more and more and more. I would recommend, if you're going to come to our November Azrael Sundered game, you give Chris's Impending Gloom campaign a watch, because that's really important. And we're going to do some more videos near the future as well, like the top 10 things you need to know. But it's well worth coming to if you're not down for that November event. Head over to the page and we'll see what we can sort out. But that is it. That is Lost City. That's how the campaign worked. It went right the way through. The guys unfortunately did fail, but that's not to say that it was in vain. Everyone had a good time. Nobody died. The campaign or the game, sorry, went reasonably smoothly. The very last thing we do for all of our games with the War Council is we make sure that feedback is sought from our players. Every player is always sent the same feedback form for every single game, and it all focuses around those 6 Ps. So let me bring them back up again. These 6 Ps are the fundamentals to DMing for us: the preparation, the pace, and the purpose, the players, the patience, the presentation. The only one I've not really spoken about so far tonight is presentation. And hopefully you can easily see why, because you can see all the maps, you can see the images, you can see the tokens, you can see everything. There is one thing with presentation that I have not covered, and that's me. If I stop sharing, hopefully this will pick up on me talking. I'm just going to quickly change this so I can see what's going on. There we go. When my players play games with me, what you see on the screen now is what they see when they play. Hopefully without a little bit of a delay that I'm getting online. Behind me is the Charity Gaming Guild logo. I'm sat in a quiet room in a quiet place with no distractions at all. The game has my undivided attention, and the players know that I'm talking to them, and that they have me to themselves to run that game for them. And it's really, really important. I'm going to show you what it actually looks like in my room without my virtual background on, and hopefully you should see the reason why we put it on there. Cool. There we go. So this is my room without the background on. Now there's a lot going on behind me. I've got shelves on that side stuffed with books. I've got cabinets full of models. I've got things on the wall. I've got a little Asmodeus on my shoulder, just over here. There's a lot going on, and it's a distraction for the players. And as a DM, you want your players to be focused on you. So by taking those distractions away and presenting yourself as the DM in the best possible light, you're going to hold the attention of your players for much, much longer. That is it. That's all I've got to say on this. I'm going to back on because my room's a mess. Okay. I haven't seen any questions come up on the chat, which is absolutely fine. I'm just going to give it a minute or two longer just in case anything does come up. Once the video finishes, I'm going to pop this up onto YouTube. I'll get Nathan to help me do that. I'm sure he'll be up for that. And then we will get it put up there for anybody to ask questions, anybody to watch back and enjoy. I hope you found that useful. There are no questions coming through, so I'm going to call it a day there. Thank you very much for joining us. And again, head over to our events page, have a look at what's going on, what's coming up. There's less online stuff at the moment, but there's plenty of face-to-face stuff. And keep your eyes on the page for some really exciting new content coming your way very soon. Thanks, guys.